My dream was to move to a small snowy town. I wanted a house in the woods on the outskirts of town, but not too far away. When I was 8, my family moved to Winnipeg. We lived in a small community with about 300 people. We moved to Winnipeg because my mother got a nice job opportunity there. I'm now 25 and I have lived here since. I don't like living in the city. I would much rather go back to our old community. I loved it there. 8 months ago, I won $2,000 on a lotto ticket. I was ecstatic. I could finally move out and live my dream. I gave my parents $200,000 each and kept the rest for myself. I started to browse the internet for houses that matched my liking. After about 2 hours, I found one. It was perfect. It was located in Kenora, Ontario. It was on a secluded dirt road that led into the forest. Plus, it was only around 2.5 hours away. I was pumped. I went through the process and bought it. It was now mine. I packed my things and headed out around 11 a.m. to my new home. I arrived in around 3 hours. I unpacked my things and settled in. Around 2 months went by and everything was going perfectly. I got a job there and my parents came to visit every few weeks. I also started to make new friends there. Life could not be better. Some time passed again. My parents just left after visiting once again. It was about 6 p.m. I decided to head out for some dinner. I came home around 8 hours and started to get ready for bed. My shift started at 5 a.m. I got a quick shower and put some shorts on. I laid in bed and fell asleep. I was awoken by what sounded like a scream outside my window. My eyes shot open. I watched the curtains move in the breeze as I listened to it echo in the night silence. It scared the shit out of me. My heart was in my throat. I started to calm down when I remembered that foxes made similar noises. Fucking fox, I murmured to myself. I started to drift off when it happened again. This time it sounded closer than the other. I sighed and got up out of bed. I was still a little on edge, but I pushed through the fear. I peered out the window towards the tall trees. I peered around, but to no avail. I looked at the hardwood floor for a second, then looked back up. Behind a tree around 100 feet away, I saw something move. I gasped and then closed the window. I ran back to bed and hid under the covers. The reason for my panic was a story my grandpa told me when I was 14. He told me about a creature called a skinwalker. He described it as a large humanoid creature with dark skin and no hair. It can disguise itself as an animal or human and make sounds like a scream or mimic the voice of a loved one or friend to drag you in. The only way it could be killed was to shoot it with a silver bullet. This idea was running through my mind. I stayed under the covers for about 10 minutes. There have been no screams since then. Over time, I started to calm down. I had to use the bathroom, so I got up and walked towards the door. I stopped moving for a second to itch my ankle when I heard a whimper outside. I froze. It sounded like a dog or some other small animal. In my mind, I thought, stop being a pussy, it's probably just a dog or something. Skinwalkers aren't even real, you idiot. I snapped out of my haze and continued to the bathroom. I finished in there and walked out. Before returning to bed, I peered towards my front door. Something was blocking the window. There is a porch light, so I could tell something was there. I thought that maybe it was a desk I ordered that might have shown up sometime after I went to sleep. I watched the mass for about 5 seconds when my heart dropped. I watched as the mass slowly shrank below the window of the door. I started to hear the whimper again, this time muffled by the front door. I laid my back behind the wall by the stairs and pulled out my phone. I started to dial the number of one of my neighbors, Paul. I called Paul because he is a professional hunter. He has a lot of weapons, so he was the best choice. He didn't pick up the first 2 calls, but picked up the third. In a groggy, annoyed voice, he said, "What? I need help. There's something at my door whimpering," I said, my voice trembling. "Like what?" This time he sounded more interested. I'm not sure. I think of some sort of animal," I said. "Hold on." I heard the phone scuffle around a bit, then he spoke again. "Looks like a small dog," he said. His bedroom window had a perfect view of my front door. "Please don't think I'm crazy, but I swear I saw it shrink," I said, feeling like an idiot. Dead silence. "Hello?" I asked. "Did you say shrink?" Yeah. Why?" He paused for a moment and started up again. "Here's what I want you to do. Stay where you are. Try not to make any noise. If anything changes, you need to tell me, okay? I'm gonna grab my rifle," he said confidently. "Oh, okay," I whispered. About 2 minutes passed. I could hear Paul moving and doing stuff in his house. Finally, he came back on. "All right, I'm gonna open the window," he said. I peered around the corner and looked out the transom window. I could see his window slide open. I heard him rack his rifle. "All right," he said. I waited about 3 seconds until Paul spoke up again. I don't see anything there." As he said this, I realized that the whimpering had ceased. "I can't hear the whimper anymore," I said. "That's not good. Listen, I need you to make a decision. Either make a run for my house or I make a run to you," he exclaimed. "Well, you have the gun, so could you come here?" I said. He sighed. "All right, I'm coming." He hung up the phone. About 8 seconds later, I heard his front door opening from my bedroom window. It took around a minute, but finally, I heard a knock on the door. Relief washed over me. I started to walk down the stairs. About halfway down, Paul shouted out to me, "It's safe to come to the door, hurry." I sped up and started to unlock the door when I remembered what my grandpa said. It can make sounds like a scream or mimic the voice of a loved one or friend to drag you in. I stopped in my tracks and started to back up from the door. I headed back up the stairs and decided to peer out my bedroom window. There in the street was Paul, not moving. I turned white as a ghost. The person at the door wasn't Paul. It was the creature. I didn't know what to do next, but I came up with a plan. I was going to distract the creature by throwing something behind my house. When I knew it was there, I was going to run out the front door into the street and grab Paul's gun. When the creature comes back around, I will shoot it in the head, hopefully killing it. If Paul knew what it was, he must have had silver bullets loaded. I grabbed a vase from the hallway and headed toward the bathroom again. I slowly started to open the window. I made sure the coast was clear and dropped the vase onto the ground. I heard the creature scurry away from the front deck. I quickly ran towards the front door. I unlocked it and swung it open. I made a break for Paul. His throat was sliced and there was a pool of blood around his head. I grabbed the gun and looked toward my house. I shouted at the creature, asking it to show itself. The road fell silent. After about 10 seconds, I saw it galloping out from the side of my house on all fours. I raised the rifle and shot, closing my eyes. My eyes peeled open. The creature was in a fetal position on the ground, back onto me. This thing must have been 10 feet tall. It was huge. I racked the rifle and started to approach. Slowly but surely, I crept my way up towards its body. I was about 6 feet away. I raised the rifle again, this time aiming for the head. I pulled the trigger. The thing jumped up and ran away into the woods, whimpering the whole way. Finally, this thing was over. I pulled out my phone and called 911. I explained what happened, not expecting them to believe me. At this point, a few neighbors down the road were woken up by the gunshot and came to see what happened. The police arrived in about 15 minutes. Soon after that, black vans with tinted windows rolled up. Government. I knew right away why they were there. I was questioned all night. I wasn't allowed to stay in my house for about a month. I didn't want to stay either. The government offered to buy the house after I expressed my urge to leave. I sold it for a little bit less than I bought it for. I bought a one-way ticket to Winnipeg and got out of there. It's been about 2 weeks. I've since moved back with my parents and don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I had to board up the windows in my bedroom because I couldn't bring myself to sleep in there. I can't stay home alone either, or else I'll start panicking. For now, I'm going to stay with my parents until I get over it. I think I'm going to get a place in the city so there are no woods. It's safe to say my dream has changed. I'm done with the woods forever. I was 17 when this happened. I know I'm not a child and should not be writing this, but God, what else do I do? We had a 2-story house that was huge. We lived in the woods and had a fenced-in backyard, so my siblings would not wander off too far into the woods and get lost. We did not have many neighbors, and the ones we did have lived quite far from our house. We had ATVs and 4-wheelers for me and my siblings. That way, if we ever needed to get help fast, we would have a quicker way to get there. So it was a warm August night, the sun setting, the house quiet, no dogs barking. We owned 5 dogs, all of them inside dogs. I was laying in my bay window, reading a book I had recently gotten, looking at the sunset outside. I've had weird experiences in this house before, but I convinced myself it was my younger sister who had sleepwalking issues, or the dogs making some noises. This night was much different than all of the others, something I could not comprehend. As the sun completely went down, I shut my curtains and turned on my fairy lights around my room and crawled into bed, turning on my projector, ready to watch a movie and eat some good popcorn. As the movie began, it started to storm outside, raining with thunder and lightning. I enjoyed the sounds of the rain. It was comforting to me. There was a full moon that had managed to sneak through my window. A few hours later, I was ready to go to bed, so I turned off my projector and fairy lights and called it a night. Around 3 a.m., I heard some weird noises. I sat up and flicked on my lamp, noticing my closet door was open. I never left it open. I got up and shut it, but not before hearing loud breathing inside. I thought I pissed myself in that moment. I grabbed my phone and crept downstairs, planning to sleep on our pull-out couch. I was terrified that breathing was not human breathing. 2 of my dogs joined me on the couch, and I was able to sleep through the rest of the night. The next day went by as normal until it came time to settle in for bed. I had my parents check my room, and there was nothing. I put a chair under the closet doorknob to ensure nothing could get in or out. One of my dogs came up and slept with me, which did make me feel safer. I did some girly things with my crystals and said prayers in hopes that nothing would happen. What I did not know is that tonight would be much worse than any of the others. I woke up around 10 that morning to a disgusting stench in my room. I didn't see anything, but I noticed my dog was gone and assumed my parents let him out so he could do his business. The chair. The chair was gone. I knew the odor was inside that damned closet. I decided to see for myself, and God, I wish I hadn't. There laid my dog, Marley. Her body was lifeless, blood pooling around her. I screamed. I didn't know what else to do. My parents and uncle who was visiting came running. My uncle grabbed me and held me. We had always had a great relationship. Marley was buried on the property, and my father made a small headstone out of old wood he had. After that night, things kept getting worse. Each Saturday to follow, I would find one more of my poor puppies, in the same state as Marley, in my closet. After I found my second dog, I moved out of that room and into the spare room, chaining my closet door closed and doing the same to my bedroom door. But the dogs were still found in the closet, even with the chains on both doors. By the 5th Saturday, we lost all of our dogs, deciding not to get more. But as the time went on in the spare room, it followed me. I would find my closet a complete mess. Things moved that I never touched. My window would have bloody handprints on it from time to time. I was baptized despite my family not being religious. A priest blessed our house, or at least tried to. The priest was found 4 days later, dead, with satanic carvings found all over his body. That was it. I started getting angry with my family for not moving us. We had the money, we had the credit, we had the ability. But what happened on Christmas finally motivated them. We had the whole family at our house, seeing as we had the space. My uncle was the only person who knew the truth. We lied, saying we sold the dogs because they were acting out, despite them all being dead and buried on our hill. When the family was all settled to sleep, I laid awake on our couch. My aunt and uncle took my bedroom, which I didn't mind. Even over the TV and heater running, I heard a thud from our back deck. I sat up and looked towards the big glass doors that led outside. I grabbed my coat and boots, going outside to see what happened. I stopped in shock. My little sister was laying face down in the layer of snow, her body distorted in every way. After I could move, I ran inside and just screamed. Not my dad's name, not my mom's name, I just fucking screamed. My dad and uncle came down first, looking around. I pointed outside and fell to my knees, hearing my dad scream out in pain, emotional pain. We were never able to determine if it was her sleepwalking that led her to our second-story balcony, or if it was the thing that killed off my beloved puppies. The whole family stayed awake that night, comforting each other. Only my parents went when the ambulance came. The rest of us had chose to stay behind to let my parents grieve. Her funeral was a few days later. It was the most heartbreaking thing of my life. Sarah and Jack had always dreamt of owning a home. After years of saving, they finally had enough to buy a house. They found a beautiful old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. It was everything they had ever wanted: spacious, charming, and full of character. The price was surprisingly affordable, almost too good to be true. Eager to start their new life, they quickly signed the papers and moved in. The first few days in their new home were blissful. Sarah loved decorating the house, and Jack enjoyed exploring the vast, overgrown garden. However, it wasn't long before they began to notice strange things happening. One evening, as Sarah was unpacking boxes in the kitchen, she heard a faint whisper behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. She dismissed it as her imagination and continued unpacking. But the whispers continued, growing louder and more frequent. They seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. Jack was initially skeptical when Sarah told him about the whispers. He suggested they were just settling noises common in old houses. But one night, he heard them too. They were sitting in the living room, enjoying a quiet evening when they both heard a soft, indistinct murmuring. It was unmistakable, and it sent chills down their spines. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Jack decided to investigate. He spent hours inspecting the walls, looking for anything that could explain the noises. He found nothing unusual, no hidden speakers or gaps where sound could travel through. The whispers remained a mystery. As the days passed, the strange occurrences escalated. They started hearing footsteps in the hallways at night. Doors would open and close on their own, and objects would move inexplicably. Sarah found herself constantly on edge, feeling as though she was being watched. Jack tried to remain rational, but even he couldn't deny that something was very wrong. One particularly eerie night, Sarah woke up to the sound of a child crying. The sound was coming from the basement. Heart pounding, she woke Jack, and they both crept down the stairs, following the sound. As they reached the basement door, the crying abruptly stopped. They stood there, frozen in fear, before finally mustering the courage to open the door. The basement was empty, but the air felt thick and oppressive, as though they were not alone. The next day, they decided to ask their neighbors if they knew anything about the house's history. Most of them were tight-lipped, but an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson revealed a chilling story. Many years ago, a family had lived in the house. The father, driven mad by unknown forces, had murdered his wife and children before taking his own life. Since then, the house had changed hands numerous times, with each new owner experiencing unexplainable phenomena until they eventually fled. Terrified but determined, Sarah and Jack decided to research the house's history themselves. They visited the local library and dug through old newspapers and records. They discovered that Mrs. Thompson's story was true. The house had a dark past, and it seemed that the spirits of the murdered family were still trapped within its walls. Armed with this knowledge, they decided to seek help from a local paranormal investigator named Tom. Tom had a reputation for dealing with haunted houses and agreed to assist them. He arrived one evening, equipped with various tools and gadgets to detect paranormal activity. As Tom began his investigation, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. The whispers grew louder, and shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Tom used a device to capture electronic voice phenomena, EVP, and the recordings were chilling. They heard faint voices pleading for help, cries of anguish, and even the menacing laughter of a man. Tom concluded that the spirits were indeed the family that had been murdered. They were trapped in the house, reliving their final moments over and over again. To help them move on, Tom suggested a cleansing ritual to release the spirits from their torment. That night, Tom performed the ritual, with Sarah and Jack assisting. They lit candles, burned sage, and recited prayers to cleanse the house. As the ritual progressed, the house seemed to come alive with energy. The temperature dropped, and they heard the sound of a man shouting in rage, followed by the cries of children. Just as they were about to finish the ritual, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Sarah screamed, and Jack rushed to open the door. They found themselves face to face with a dark, shadowy figure. It was the spirit of the father, his face twisted with anger and madness. Tom shouted for them to continue the ritual, and they hurriedly recited the final prayers. The shadowy figure lunged at them, but as the last words were spoken, it let out a blood-curdling scream and vanished into thin air. The house fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The next morning, Sarah and Jack woke up to a house that felt different. The whispers were gone, and the air was no longer heavy with dread. Tom assured them that the spirits had been freed and could finally rest in peace. Sarah and Jack were relieved but decided that they couldn't stay in the house. The memories of their experiences were too traumatic. They sold the house and moved to a new home, vowing to never speak of what had happened. Years later, they heard that the old Victorian house had been demolished and a new building had been erected in its place. They hoped that whatever evil had resided in the house was finally gone for good. Sarah and Jack never forgot their ordeal, but they were grateful to have survived. Their experience had taught them that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and the dead can linger, seeking justice or revenge. They had learned the hard way that some houses are better left alone.